today we're talking about, good morning, Kelly. How are you?
Good morning.
Um,
Hey, girl. Hey. Look,
I'm
I'm
gonna put
just
in
trying
some
to
headphones.
rig up my thing.
So today we are talking about envy and all those feelings of maybe jealousy or wanting what someone else wants. To put it differently,
Mm-hmm.
and how that shows up in this space of low fertility. So for a lot of us, and I also kind of wanted to talk about, you can still hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. I also wanted to talk about how it works with just feeling triggered, having someone or seeing someone have what you want, maybe. And so for me personally, I went through a period of time where I couldn't even look, or it was very difficult for me to look at my own pictures, my own pregnancy pictures, my own pictures of Reagan as a baby. All those things used to really trigger me and just make me feel a certain kind of way. So, and I know for a lot of times, that's how it is for a lot of us, that it's that immense desire for something that is just seems so completely unattainable, so out of your grasp, and that you don't necessarily want to take away from someone else, but it is in that moment feeling, why can't that be me? Why can't I have those things? And and then for me personally, I always used to feel like a sense of uh self-loathing, I guess, shame, maybe. Why am I envious of this person? If I see someone who's pregnant, why am I feeling like, why do I have this? It's kind of a gross feeling. That's the way I could describe it. It's just kind of like, I don't like feeling like that. So maybe we can start there and talk about just maybe, because one thing you and I talked about previously was basically that all emotions and feelings are normal and acceptable and natural and reasonable. Maybe we can start there, dealing with these feelings of envy or jealousy that are normal.
So, as I was saying, yes, to your point, we all have a wide range of emotions that we experience. But often we've kind of been conditioned to see certain emotions as negative and others as more positive. And it's not fair, because it kind of gives off this illusion that if I have this experience, if I have this emotion, and what we deem to be negative is something that comes up for me, I'm in the wrong. I've done something wrong. I'm a bad person. I shouldn't be feeling this way. And we really, as a society, need to get to a place where we normalize all feelings. However, teaching people how to appropriately, for what all that means, respond to that emotion, right? So, for all intents and purposes, if I suffer a loss, expected or unexpected, one may believe, or that I'm going to be angry about that, I'm going to be sad about that, I'm going to be confused about that. um and so is punching a window, or physically harming someone else, um a logical response to said anger? No, it may not be logical, right? It is obviously not healthy, because now we're doing harm in some other capacity. um but it's where we are. We're not regulated to a point where we can, you know, um, be in control of the way we emote, or the way we kind of bring that emotion back in. So we really have to start teaching effortful control. When I'm experiencing anger, when I'm experiencing disappointment, when I'm sad, even when I'm happy, because sometimes, we see people who have um, just very extravagant displays of their happiness, and it can be, annoying, or just not appropriate for whatever the setting may be. So we need to teach emotional regulation across the board, not just with emotions that we deem to be negative, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would that look like in the moment of, so again, personal, experience, personal story. I had one of my sisters said that they were having a baby completely
Mhm.
out of the blue, and I had just, let's say, a week or so prior, had taken a pregnancy test and it was negative. So I was definitely
Mhm.
all up in my emotions. And so, and this is my sister. Of course, I want nothing but the best for her. Of course, am happy and excited for her. But I think in the moment of me saying, "Oh my God, congratulations," I immediately started crying. And
Mhm.
my sisters were there to, they started to try to comfort me. And I was completely repelled by that. I didn't want that. Um, at no point did I want to make it about me. At no point did I want to take away from her moment. But they were both like, and I was basically saying, no, 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 no. And then one of my sisters literally said, yes, 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 yes. And then she started
Mhm.
hugging me and consoling me, but which
Mhm.
made me feel better. But so in that moment, I was definitely feeling bad that again, best way I can say it, probably I just felt like I was making it about me. But the fact that you can have two, I would say, contrasting emotions, very strong, like equal emotions at the very same time. Like this is just as strong as this one. I was so happy for her and so excited to have a new niece or nephew. But at the same time, I was
Mhm.
just like, WTF. So what would you say
Yeah,
in those moments? What's like a quick thing to kind of work through?
sure. So, as much as we possibly can, if we have the support system, it can be helpful to kind of put people on notice in regards to where you are, right? If let's say that I'm aware of my emotions and kind of trying to be preventative, I can tell my support person like, hey, if you see me responding in this way, here's what I would like for you to do. Whether that's intervene on my behalf, whether that's get me out the space so that I can go somewhere and try to one connect back with my breath. Sometimes when we're in those heightened sense of emotion, we stop breathing, right? We get tensed up. We're trying to mask and cover and kind of repress whatever that emotion is that's kind of bubbling up for us. So if you're not in a space where you feel comfortable releasing that, one of the best things that you can probably do is to shift your environment. Is there
Mhm.
somewhere that I can get to where I can comfortably release this emotion, or I can just even try to regulate to figure out what is it that I'm experiencing? Because sometimes we don't know. We're just all of a sudden we're crying, or all of a sudden we're laughing at something that doesn't really connect with the moment. Um, so I would definitely say, can I shift my environment so that I can really tune into what's going on? Um, but to your specific example, right? I'm believing in the moment that I'm making this about me
Mhm.
with practice, because all of these coping skills and mechanisms take practice over time. We might want to start challenging like our core beliefs. Why do I believe that having a moment of sadness and a moment of happiness is wrong? Right? What are some of what are some of those core beliefs rooted in for me to diminish this experience that I'm having on both ends of the emotional spectrum? Why do I believe that I can't have duality in emotions, at one time? So, the quickest thing I would say in the moment is to get away. Over time, I would say let's start processing these things. Let's start reflecting on our reactions and our responses so that we can find better ways to attend to whatever emotion may be coming up.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and it seems like that's a common theme. The whole thing about having the support system, because
Hmm.
at no point during this process, um, I don't think, maybe someone out there is, but there's no way to do it all alone. Not saying you're
Hmm.
telling the world, not saying you're on Instagram like me talking about every single day, but there's no way to do it alone. Whether that's with your partner, or even sometimes depending. So I was talking about this with a friend of mine, like how um, I don't know how we are nurtured or whatever, but sometimes between the sexes, the men and the women, we process differently and we
Hmm.
kind of process emotions differently. And so sometimes they aren't even, it's you two, of course, going through the thing, but sometimes they might not even be the primary person because of the way that you're just different. We're all different, right? And so how we
Yeah.
process things differently. But that just seems like something common. Like you're not gonna survive this if you don't have your tribe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that comes back to a question of, what are our value systems and what are our value systems teaching us about how we should show up in certain roles, right? Maybe as a friend, I'm open to support, when things are going well, when things are steeped in success, when I'm doing things adequately, right? It's a little bit more easier to let people in and support you through the good things. But when we kind of hit those spaces of failure and shame and blame, sometimes our natural response is to, go retreat within ourselves because maybe that's where it feels safe. Especially if I've had experiences with judgment and criticism that have made me over the years feel bad about those emotions, right? For what you're crying for. This ain't nothing to be sad about. Go get it together. Stop crying before I give you something to cry about, right? We're now kind of conditioned to think that when I'm experiencing these emotions, I'm wrong, I'm bad, I need to tuck it away.
Um,
So that's why I kind of really emphasize the fact that when you get this education or when you push yourself to kind of be open, you can get a different subjective reality from someone else. And then that can allow you to kind of reflect on your own. Are these things that I'm telling myself, that I'm believing, that I'm kind of holding and critiquing myself within, is that my voice? Or has that been steeped in other people's realities that have kind of been just conditioned within myself? And unfortunately, sometimes we don't get to a place where we can challenge those core beliefs and values until something happens, right? Until it happens to you or until it happens to me. So that's where we really have to work to kind of give grace to ourselves as we're learning to show up differently or to respond to ourselves and tend to ourselves differently in the face of griefs and traumas.
mm. So what would you say, like from a clinical perspective, in those moments of, um, would you say it's avoidance? Is it in those moments of feeling triggered, in those moments of feeling envy or or even jealousy? Is there any avoidance kind of lurking around too? Not wanting to be faced with those things, and then kind of not resentful, but it's kind of coming to mind too of having to deal with
So
it.
I think sometimes specific to this topic, what we call envy and jealousy, yes, those are things that are present, but I think it's also rooted in the fact that you're grieving, right? So
Mm,
in grief, we have anger, we have denial, we have bargaining, we have, acceptance at some point. So um, I think it's the awareness of what you're actually experiencing, right? When I can kind
mm,
of put a name to it. This just ain't me, being ill with someone because they have something that I want. It's attached to beliefs. I believe that I was going to have this, picture perfect expectation. And now you have something that I felt I was supposed to have.
mm,
Or, I can't believe that I don't have what you have. I'm still grieving the fact that what I believe to be true, what I manifested, what I put all of my value in for, certain regards is not mine. It may never be mine. Um, so I think we really have to get in a position where we can call to name the experience that we're actually having.
mhm,
And again, if I shut myself out, which for a lot of people is a protective factor, I'm protecting myself from others people's, subjective realities of what I'm going through. Um, I believe that I'm doing it in service of myself. And so we can ask ourselves over time or when we feel safe with people, how's that working? How is masking your feelings, keeping them in, repressing, how is that working out for you? For us to maybe get to a place where we recognize what once was a protective factor is maybe now a self-defeating behavior. I'm defeating myself from being able to be open to those supports to help me when I experience again these very human and natural emotions.
yeah. Yeah, and I think we kind of talked about that a little bit last week too. That the protective factor of all those things, that um, it can serve a place for a
Mhm,
time, but being
mhm,
open and willing to reassess, as you say, how's that working out for you? Being open and willing to reassess as time moves on. And depending on where you are,
mhm,
it's always changing. It's always shifting. And then of course, just life. You have good days, you have bad days. So just to
mhm,
thinking about that, like just thinking for myself, like being open and maybe even a little honest, open and honest with myself about where I am,
mhm,
because I love to put things in boxes and keep them there. I love to put
mhm,
lids on things and just let them sit and leave me alone. I'm very good at that. Um, and I'm learning recently that to try to, address those things more and not let them stay where they are. Especially, I think, too, and I don't know, this is me personally, but because now I'm in year, maybe two and a half. So also it's like, okay, how long, as you would say, how's that working out for you? How long do you plan on doing this, Erica? So now I'm reassessing and trying to grow and adjust and, like you're saying, challenge the core belief of, okay, is this really how is the best way to support yourself? And in those moments, when you said like it's really grief, I'm like, yes. But like you said, it's being able to name those things, because I don't always
mhm,
have the right language, and I'm not always doing the best self-talk, and I'm not always doing the best,
mhm,
assessment. So yeah, to be in the state of grief and to have the reminder that you are grieving, because you go and live your life and the world keeps spinning, the sun keeps rising, the world keeps going on, even though there's like this massive weight still kind of on you. But
mhm.
in those moments to say what this really is, maybe it's just grief. Your feelings are still hurt, your feelings are still raw from wanting
Yeah.
that thing and not having that thing, or in the case of, let's say, a loss, having something and losing it, or even, never being able to obtain it in general. So thank you
Yeah.
for that revelation for me, I
Mm,
would say. Um, Another thing I wanted to ask about was, you talked about when we, spoke earlier about, how we tend to, I think we all are aware of this, but we tend to put more value or more weight on negative things. You just remember that one time someone did you wrong, but forget the 100 times that. So, and
mhm,
that happens in all spaces. So maybe we
mhm,
can talk about that for a little bit, just how, um, I was gonna say how the mind plays tricks on you, that it just leads you somewhere that is not the perfect review of the facts. That's
mhm,
not exactly what happened.
mhm. So sometimes we experience negative situations more intensely, um, emotionally, physically, psychologically. It can have a greater impact just on the overall being. And so when you have that time after time after time, the body can, build up a defense to it. And sometimes the way we remember things are also our ways of kind of protecting ourselves as well. Um, and so part of that, I think, over time is, um, again, questioning expectations, questioning, whose lens am I looking through to validate what is success in this particular situation, what safety is in this particular situation, and are there certain things that kind of point to the lack thereof or the sufficiency of. And so when you kind of start working to compassionately challenge those things, because how you said you are very raw and you don't want to be dismissive and overly critical as we typically are, when we are in spaces of perceived failure, we have to work to kind
Yeah.
of give our permission, give ourselves permission to pivot, to give new meaning to whatever that situation may have been, to empower us in spaces where we have felt victimize or control or lack of control. I have to work to kind of to have new vision towards what that particular event meant to me. And as I can safely do that for all that that means, um, I can move away from having to protect myself in this thing and feeling safe and just experiencing and exploring the full breadth truthfully and honestly and rawly for whatever it is. It's kind of closing that expectation gap. Here's what I expected. Here's what I believe to be true. Here is what, I'm putting as purpose and meaning on this situation versus here's the reality of what happened. And yes, this is very hard. And yes, this hurts me, and yes, here are things that I now have access to, or that I have awareness, that I have support and connection to that can help me move through this thing. And that takes years for some people, and for others, it's a easier process. So patience, can sometimes be difficult to have with ourselves when things aren't turning out as quickly as we're kind of projecting them to be.
Um, one thing that you just said, how some things are protected,
Hmm.
and certainly, dealing with low fertility, in this space in general, protection is, I again personally, that's very valuable to me. Anything I can do to reduce, eliminate, just make it not so freaking horrible, terrible,
Hmm.
painful, all the above. Um,
Hmm.
I'm on board for all those things. So whether that, um, again, the little boxes that I have, or like you're saying, but then I also heard you say too that you need to come to a place of just being patient with yourself and getting there eventually, because again, some days are better than others. Some days I manage better
Hmm.
than others, and some days, what triggered me yesterday, I'm like I think I posted the other day. I'm like obsessed with home birthing videos. I can watch them all day right now, but that's new. Um,
Hmm.
so just thinking about that, how allowing space, I guess, for sounds like you got to allow space for everything. Um, that at some point you do want to protect yourself, and you may not always be ready and able or in a position to deal with things, but at some point, you do need to kind of take a step and kind of
Hmm.
address it and acknowledge it and work through it and ask all the questions to challenge it, to challenge those thoughts. But I'm all for
Yeah.
it.
I think as we, continue to have more conversations about these things, it will hopefully over time normalize the places that many of us find ourselves in, the spaces of grief, um, giving us a collective permission to be honest and truthful, and not feel that in that being, that it's going to be more consequential than potentially beneficial. To your point when you said, is it an avoidance thing? Of course, if I can stop this thing from happening, stop myself from experiencing, what I know to be overwhelming or just um, perceivably threatening, yeah, I'm gonna do everything in my power. Um, n- Feel thing, and it typically manifests in other ways. The stress will come out. It may come out in the way that I'm connecting or the lack thereof in relationships. It may come out in my overall focus. I may just, for all intents and purposes, just blow up one day and not really understand why, because I've been ignoring the signs. I've been ignoring the
Mhm.
signals for a very, very long time. And I think, that is a way that we can start thinking about our emotions. My emotions don't have to define me. My thoughts don't have to define me, but they can serve as warning signs, just like in your car, right? These
Mhm.
are my check engine lights that
Wow.
are going off and saying, "Hey, something is happening." Something in my internal being or external environment is pushing something. Let's take a look at that.
Mhm.
Um, and so with practice, we may find that when we look at some things about ourselves and our experience, we don't like it. And so that may shoot us back into that cycle of ignoring things and avoiding things. Um, we have to build things that allow us to feel supported and safe even in those spaces. So, what makes me feel safe in conversation? What makes me feel safe in emotion? And sometimes thinking about it separate from whatever this event may be, right? And trying that on for size. When I have somebody holding my hand, when someone is not looking directly at me and just letting me speak freely, when I have someone um, touching me as a grounding space,
Mm,
do those things allow me to feel a sense of internal comfort or external comfort that then make it, okay for me to start talking about some of the harder things.
mm,
So that takes time to get to know within ourselves. It really, really does. And when you're grieving, that's just something else to add to the plate, right? Another skill. So that's why I kind of talk about the fact that we have to be patient, because if I'm flooded with emotion, if I'm overwhelmed with thoughts and feelings, I don't have the capacity to take on something else to learn how to do. So that's why we have to kind of be patient as we shed, as we get back to a space of regulation, asking myself, where am I, what can I possibly handle at this moment, even if it's the smallest thing. That's where I start.
yeah. I want to go back for 1 second. I'm curious, if I'm in a space where I'm constantly being triggered, would you say that that is probably happening at the same time that I am not dealing with things? Would you say that they're like inversely, like the more you address things and deal with them and process them, would you say maybe those feelings of being triggered and would go down? Would you say that, like, I guess my question is, would that be a sign that, okay, you got some work to do? If you feel yourself in
If I'm
space,
constantly being triggered,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Excuse me.
And I think grieving is not a linear process. So we can't sit here and say that, if you've been doing work for a year, you shouldn't be feeling any triggers at all.
Mhm.
That's very subjective. That's very, very subjective. You can be doing the work and recognize that, ooh, there's still many, many layers to this.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, I tell clients in therapy, it's gonna feel heavier before it feels lighter. It really is going to feel heavier before it feels lighter, because now you're facing that thing and everything that you thought it meant and everything that you are coming to understand that it means and everything that you are trying to shape and form new meaning around. It's going to feel heavier, and so we're more um sensitive at that point. Our vulnerabilities are bust wide open. So
Yeah.
what didn't trigger me before, it may trigger me now. And so it's again being patient with yourself, that as I learn and as I grow and as I gain um, emotional control and regulation, maybe over time, the way that I respond even to the influx of triggers, is something that's more stabilizing to me than just saying I'm not going to be triggered whatsoever.
At all.
We're always in a constant space of work, you know. For all intents and purposes, you can be in a good space for years and never have thought about something, and that just opens up a whole can of, well, what ifs and the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. Um,
Mhm.
so I think over time, with triggers, sometimes we don't experience them as intensely. And for some, things no longer become, things no longer are triggers anymore. But that's a very individual and unique space. So
Mhm.
we don't want to put anyone in a position of shame or blame because they aren't quite finding themselves moving as quickly. But we do have stuck points, and so when we do find that we're actively doing the work, and it just seems like you can't move past it, then that's where we have to kind of dig a little deeper. Is there something deeper for me to challenge myself in gaining awareness that I'm just not quite ready to open up yet? And that takes the vulnerability with self. So yes and no to that answer,
Yeah.
that question.
I was just curious about that because also while you're talking, I'm thinking about basically the idea of like PTSD of this all and how when you were saying, it takes work, it takes years, and you move in and out of it. Because
Mhm.
I definitely, for example, um, one thing that is apparently common that I'm just finding out is common is basically like a fear of going to the bathroom,
Mhm.
the fear of seeing the blood, the fear of even having your cycle start. All of these
Mhm.
things are very. First of all, any type of bleeding is pretty traumatic. For this to be connected to blood is kind of unfair, but um, so all those things are kind of like a shock to the system in the moment.
Mhm.
For me, there's one bathroom in this house that I pretty much hate using because both times I had a miscarriage, that was when I saw that I was bleeding. And
Mhm.
and then even again, having like, let's say you are trying, and month after month, that first day of blood, first day of bleeding, like all these things are kind of, the best word I can say is traumatic in PTSD. Do you think that applies?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Those are traumatizing moments. And again, it might be more for some than others. And so I guess like specific to the bathroom, I may have to gradually expose myself back to that space as I'm reframing my thoughts about what that space means.
Mhm.
But I also, have to be honest with myself about what that space has meant.
Yes.
You know, it's pretty much I'm validating the experience that I had. I'm also working towards telling myself what can be different, re-narrating the meaning, right? Um, so this is a place of horror, and it takes away life, and whatever negative cognitions you may be having steeped in truth in your experience, and rephrasing it. I'm healthy, I'm whole, this space will be, this space is, this space has served once, this space now will serve as, so it's kind of working to reestablish meaning, but also being gentle with ourselves and affirming what our experiences are. I know it's really hard. Every time I look down at an expectation and my expectation hasn't quite met up. And it's okay to be sad about that. It's okay to be disappointed. So again, you're giving yourself permission to feel whatever it is in response to that experience. Permission is important.
I'm realizing that I don't do that quite often. I don't.
Mhm.
I Even though I think I'm processing it, I never really say, this is okay, right? What you feel is
Mhm.
totally. I don't really address it that way. I just try to move through it, process it,
Mhm.
observe what's happening. I try those type of techniques, but I don't really ever just, maybe other people will say that to me. Maybe my mom or my husband,
Mhm.
whoever. I don't know. Maybe they'll say those type of things to me, but I never really affirm it for
Mhm.
myself. And now I'm thinking about how what I'm missing out on from not doing that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Mhm.
this is to give myself permission to feel any way that I want to feel. Happy,
Mhm.
sad, mad, and everything
Mhm.
other, as you said, maybe getting better language to describe feelings, but those are the three that I think
Mhm.
about.
Yeah.
There's others in there, of course, right? But yeah, so that, wow, I'm having my own little
Yeah.
conversation.
I think one tool that we can kind of use is, if I was a friend of mine, what would I do? So
Mhm.
let's say that, for whatever reason, you were with a friend while they were in a space of loss, grief, disappointment. What would I do? Maybe I wouldn't jump right in to try to solve, problems, but I may just be a comfort, and I may, it's okay to feel scared right now. It's okay to be hurt right now. What do you want? What do you need? It's okay to hold yourself. I talk about that a lot, right? When people are sad, what do we typically do? We hug them and we rock them, because
Mhm.
that's a form of, regulation.
Mhm.
So in those moments when I don't necessarily know what I need, because again, I'm flooded with a whole bunch of emotion, all that I may be able to do for myself is
Mhm.
just hold me, and affirm. I'm sad, I'm hurt, I'm disappointed, I'm scared. another one, you know? Everything that truthfully comes up for you in that moment, call it for what it is.
Mm. Yeah, sorry, I'm just processing that. And I do realize that I have actually noticed that before that, because in this space we realize that a lot of people go through this, friends, families, and where I am, I end up talking about it a lot, and so
Mhm.
um, I have definitely recognized that I am more. The language I use dealing and speaking with someone else is not the same language that I use for myself, and I've noticed that I haven't necessarily flipped it yet, but um,
Yeah.
that is definitely very true. That I'm first super supportive, super. It's okay. I'm definitely that person. But with me, I try to. Let me see. What will be my first? I think my first. It depends on the day, but because I'm here probably with the kid, or it's just not very convenient. Okay, just to be having
Yeah.
this moment sometimes. So it's like get it together, get it together. But I am trying to get better at letting it out, because it feels so good to let it out sometimes. So I'm getting better at that. But in those
And
moments,
so
I'm
to
like,
that point, to that point, I think it's important to hold space for that because we won't always, when we are potentially triggered or when we just are experiencing emotion, because everything is not a trigger, right? I think that's important to say. Sometimes I'm just feeling emotion,
yeah,
it's raining outside and that's just what comes up for me. So I think we need to give power to that everything is not a trigger. Some things are just experiences that I'm having. Um, but in that space, it's not always conducive to deal with it the way that you want to deal with it. Sure, I know that crying or yelling or hitting the block for a run is cathartic, but maybe in the space that I'm in right now, I'm in the middle of a talk or I'm driving, like in these places where some of those coping mechanisms just don't fit. That's where, having option and modifying as best we can be helpful. But even telling yourself, I feel your hurt and I'm gonna hold space for that right now. And when we get home, we're gonna explore it.
mhm,
That
yeah,
too is okay.
mhm,
It is okay to control it, right? Control it is not dismissing it, controlling is not ignoring it, but it's just saying, hey, when we get to a safer place, when we get to a place that we deem to be, adequate or, whatever, then I will let us explore that. And I think it's the getting to it. Oftentimes we say we're gonna get to things later and then we just stuff it and stuff it and stuff it and stuff it. It's the
yeah,
act of being intentional about getting to it. Come on, let's sit with myself. Maybe when no one is around, maybe when someone is around. And that's where self reflection, what makes me feel capable of exploring this emotion to its full range. When nobody else is in the house and I can take a shower and ugly cry, or when everyone is asleep and I'm in, a space by myself where I don't have to worry about outside distractions, I give myself permission to sit with me in that space, to learn how to sit in the emotion and feel it and not be overcome by it, but to learn my capacity within it.
I think that's where I am getting to that space, uh, sitting in not, about my boxes. So and not
Mhm,
doing that, and just allowing, revisiting it, because
mhm,
there there was something that's not always conducive in the moment to have this huge breakdown or even this huge ugly cry, but to later to be able to kind of sit with it and just, I don't know, honor it or just face it, just because this is currently my reality. And so that's one thing that's not changing. Like, this is where I live, this is my address, this is where you can find me. So
yeah,
right now, that's just how it's prudent to address it and to acknowledge it, because it's not really
yeah.
going anywhere. But to your point too,
And,
that not
and
everything is
when the trauma and the grief is complex, right? it can be really difficult to not just feel and experience our realities as negative, as unfair, as inadequate. It can be really hard to see past that. And I know before we was talking about the 5 to 1. So for every negative thought that I have,
Mhm.
I want to try to supplement that with 5 positive or alternative thoughts, and that's really difficult for a lot of people to
Mhm.
reach, to challenge ourselves to find it. And so it may be something that's not necessarily personal to you, but just something that you observed. I just saw a cute little hummingbird sit on my rocking chair. That was nice,
Mhm.
right? Um, because you're trying to help yourself to shift your focus, to find small moments of gratitude that balance out the heavy moments that we all will have, because that's life.
Mhm.
Um, None of us are privileged to not feel negative emotion on some level, some. So um, just searching for the small things. There is great power in acknowledging and finding gratitude in the small things. And sometimes when you acknowledge the small things, it simplifies the process, right? I'm not searching for this grand thing that felt so big and so joyous, because that may not be within my reach. So identify the small things, start small, and that may help to clear some of the picture for you. That may help to shift the perspective over time, one little small pebble at a time, to eventually get you to a road, hopefully, of hopefulness again, of stability, of joy, of happiness, of connection again. So one step at a time.
And then as you were saying that too about using gratitude and even hope to kind of counteract those feelings. Uh, when you are, because it's gonna come, it's gonna happen. You're not gonna be impervious, and no matter, like you're saying, you can do work for a year or longer, and no one's saying you're
Mhm,
gonna have. You're gonna have a day, okay? So in those moments, would you say those are a few goods, or even what else? Manifesting. In those moments, using that as a counterbalance to those essentially negative, but you are realizing that feelings are feelings.
mhm,
So I talk about that in nutrition. It's not good food or bad food necessarily, but yeah, food is food. So if you're good at bad feelings, these are all
mhm,
things that have to take. So I was going to say negative feelings, but in those moments when you're having these um, maybe heavier, painful feelings, ways to kind of counterbalance that.
mhm. So I'm glad you said that. So the feelings wheel that I wanted to share is actually a emotion sensation wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, right, my hurt may look like um, scolding, or just real closed off body language. My happiness may look like me dancing and just being very energetic and all over the place. So one way to kind of identify what you need is to, because we can't all identify emotion, right? Sometimes that's difficult for people. But if I can potentially identify the feeling, like where am I feeling this thing? So when I'm getting choked up, my throat is
Mm-hmm.
feeling real tight. That's where I'm
Mm-hmm.
starting to feel it. I may need to drink something soothing. I may need to again hum, because that can be a sensory type of activity. I may need to go somewhere and yell because I'm keeping something in. So that can be a signifier. If I'm feeling it, in my other body, stretching. So progressive muscle relaxation is a really good technique to help us attune to the parts of our body where we're kind of feeling that sensation, and to kind of let it go. Um, Writing can be very helpful to gain clarity. So sometimes I tell people, just write. Don't worry about grammar or punctuation or anything, just write. And once you have kind of regulated yourself from the emotional flood, that we can kind of go back and say, okay, what was going on for me? What was kind of happening? So tuning into your senses can be a way to kind of attend to yourself in the moment, to bring awareness to other things that may actually be the core driver of what's happening and what you're experiencing.
Mm. Yeah, tuning in and that's definitely true because I can't always. I think I have a very limited emotional vocabulary, but you be feeling your heart like
You feel it.
got
Like
your
for me, I
things.
know
I
that
guess
when I'm feeling if something scares me, I
Mhm.
get tingles, like little it feels like little needle pricks, right?
Mhm.
When I am wanting to go off on someone, I feel it in my throat. I absolutely like my voice gets it feels like it deepens and it feels like it's raspy, as though you first
Mhm.
woke up and you just don't have the full range of your
Mhm.
voice. Those are things that I've come to notice within myself. Um, I'll pace back and forth, because that's a way for me to kind of soothe myself. So sometimes we have those abilities within us to self-soothe. We just don't know when to kind of kick them in gear or to put new meaning to them. I'm mad, so I'm rocking like this, but you're actually trying to regulate yourself.
Mhm.
Slow it down,
Mhm.
connect back to your breath so that you can actually, bring your heart rate down, which kicks back into some of our abilities to effectively use our um, executive functioning, right? So part of it is awareness and psychoeducation of things that you can try that we implement in heightened emotion and in kind of subtle emotion, so that when I'm in the moment, I'm not reaching for, okay, what do I do? What do I do? I've been practicing these things, right? I've been practicing these things so that I have a point of reference of, okay, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. And over time, like any other habit or skill, it kind of becomes automatic. So we have to practice those things in the thick of it and in the calmness of things to figure out what best works for us when we're in different emotional states.
Practice.
Practice makes better.
Yeah.
Practice, practice, practice. Yes.
Um, let's see. I gotta check the notes. Um, do you have any things for our toolbox this week? Whether it be affirmations or questions,
Hmm.
how to best process these moments and emotions.
Of course I do. So, our affirmation for this week, as we're talking about, acknowledgement and acceptance and permission, um, I wear my grief with pride as a badge of honor that shows my children did exist.
Mm. See,
Do
y'all are trying to
exist.
make me cry, and I don't like that. Okay, this wasn't
But
on
we
the
ain't gonna
list.
go here on that. But we could go there. We're not gonna go here on that. But if as we're practicing permission, ask yourself, why don't I want to cry? What would happen if I did
Oh,
cry?
mine's miserable.
Hmm, okay. I won't challenge you on
Most of
that.
the time, like I said, I am getting to a point where I'm like, "Ooh, that felt good."
Yeah.
But normally, years of practice have
Yeah.
made me to be very good at because I used to my belief used to be like I'll acknowledge it, I'm aware, it's not like I'm in denial that this thing is going on, but I don't want to wallow. I don't want to just sit in that. I want to deal with it and move on, but the more emotionally mature I got, I became aware that I wasn't dealing with it. I was just doing the moving on part, skipping the dealing
Mm-hmm.
with it part. But again, crying sometimes feels good. Sometimes it's like because it just takes you under. There's a whole the
Hmm.
riptide, whatever the thing is in the water.
It's not always a cathartic process. Like,
Yeah.
to keep it a buck, right? Your eyes hurt, they
Oh
sting.
my
If you
god,
try hard enough, you
it's
feel it in your
exhausting.
chest,
Your
right?
head hurts.
It is absolutely exhausting. So, for all intents and purposes, crying is not always a thing that I want to experience because of what happens when I experience it,
Yes.
right? So that's cool. That is absolutely cool. Um, Differentiate between the two. It's bad for me to cry. I shouldn't be crying versus, you know what, this is just not the space where I want to be
Yeah.
crying.
True. True.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll repeat it just, if anybody else wants to catch it. I wear my grief with pride as a badge of honor that shows my children do exist. So that's our affirmation. And then a question for reflection. In what ways are my needs slash want for more blocking or overshadowing my gratitude for what is? In what ways are my needs slash wants for more blocking or overshadowing my gratitude for what is? Um, and then a follow up to that question: in what ways may I pivot to meet my needs and wants with my current possessions, connections, or relationships? In what ways may I pivot to meet my needs slash wants with my current possessions, connections, and relationships?
Might have to grab those and write them down for everybody. We just send out a little email. Those are all great. So these would be good probably just for like a good journaling session. Or I feel like journaling sometimes the word itself is intimidating, but whatever it is, if someone wants to just grab a piece of paper and just kind of process through
Hmm.
those questions, get a post-it maybe for that
Yeah.
affirmation. I might want to do that. I don't know, but maybe write that down somewhere. That was definitely awesome.
Yeah.
So I think that might be it for this week.
All right.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So what do you do when you get off of these calls? Do you just kind of go and we stop for a second? I do.
It depends. It depends on the space that I'm in. Today, yes, it's
Mhm.
nice outside. It's a rocking chair sitting in front of me with my name on it. Um, so that's what I'm gonna do. Um, and kind of reflect on these questions myself. I think that although this is rooted in grief, you can ask yourself these questions about other things that our grief may be blocking us from, paying attention to or being aware of. So I'm just going to reflect on it, period, and enjoy this nice weather because I'm grateful for it because it's been a little cold and rainy. Um, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a few minutes before I need to go grab the kid, and that's a whole shift.
Hmm.
So in this moment where I have some minutes to myself, just gonna sit and reflect on this talk. So this was part two. We talked today about envy, jealousy, triggering, all those type of things, and dealing with those emotions, and reframing the idea of negative emotion. I think is probably one of my biggest takeaways to reframe the idea of what is a negative emotion. And so we will be back for part three, which will be feelings of failure, whether as a woman or a wife, um, and dealing with feelings of failure and distrusting your body, your body has failed you, all those type of things. So that will be part three next week. So thank you again
Thank you.
so much, Kelly,
Yeah.
for being here. And I'm loving the coordination.
I know. I said that earlier. I was like, "Do you have one, Sage?"
Yes, I think we have similar color schemes. So
I love it. So it color has become like one of my grounding tools. Um, Burnt orange, any form of green that just does it for me. I don't know what it is, but it really either invigorates me or it soothes me. It's like those are the two feelings that I kind of go in between when I wear either one of those colors. So um yeah, yeah.
grounding for sure for me. I don't know, just because it looks good, it makes me feel good. all those
Yeah.
positive emotions associated with it, and just it's soothing because it's not
Yeah.
bright, it's not, the kids into pink and purple right now. It's not these bright colors. It's just like the quiet.
You know what? Oh, something just hit my spirit. Okay. So, when we were talking about creating new meaning in
Mhm.
the space of loss, one thing that I've come to really enjoy are rituals.
Yeah.
So there was one of my peers, she had lost a couple of children, and every year around, that time, she would light a candle. She like created an altar, and
Mhm.
she would light a candle and kind of just talk to that space, talk to that connection with the babies that did not make it. And that kind of again gave new meaning and new purpose. This is a space of honor and celebration, even though we can't do that in the physical. So, finding new ways to kind of celebrate and uplift the space of expectation and the space of desire, because those two are important, while also staying steeped as much as we can in the reality of what is.
Mhm.
Um, so even thinking about that, what new rituals will kind of help me to honor the pain that I may have experienced, the loss that I have experienced, and the joy that comes after that, you know.
Mhm.
So
We decided to do that. It's inconspicuous. You wouldn't necessarily, it wouldn't catch your eye, but we know that that's what this item in our home is for. And
mhm.
it's somewhere you see it a lot. So I maybe not often, but sometimes just send love to to our children, I guess, and just into that, just give positive love and positive energy to that.
Mhm.
Yeah, to acknowledge, because
Mhm.
yeah, the loss. I mean, and again, and whether it's the loss of a physical birth, or the loss of, even if we haven't, I feel like they're even equal. I never want anyone to feel like, oh, because we have experiences, no. I really, everyone has equal rights, unfortunately, to the pain and anguish and grief. So equal rights to the grief process as well. So whatever that is
Mhm.
for you, to have, I agree with you, to have something that allows you to give, just honor it. In as much capacity as you are able to. And I think I agree with you. That's a good idea. The ritual of the lighting the candle sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for adding that for us. Something else
Okay.
for us to consider. And we will be back next week. All right. Bye. Thank you, Kelly.
Bye, everyone. Bye.